Hello and welcome to American Friction. I'm Jacob Jarvis.
And I'm Chris Jones.
Donald Trump broke with Benjamin Netanyahu this week in that he acknowledged that there is widespread starvation happening in Gaza because, frankly, there is. The very real situation in Gaza could not be more horrific, and it would appear to me that anyone with any power to stop it should be doing all they can to do so.
Trump claims to have huge geopolitical sway, but has so far failed to stop Netanyahu's actions, which more and more people are calling genocide. For example, Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, is one of those, and Amnesty International is another amongst many others. So if Trump has Netanyahu's ear and power over the supply of weapons to Israel, why hasn't he brought this to an end like he promised?
Here to discuss this with us is Professor Yossi Mekelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Professor Mekelberg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the first question I wanted to ask you was that, Trump broke from Netanyahu by saying, based on television, those children look very hungry. That's real starvation stuff. You can't fake that. That's the line that people seem to be so focused on. And to me, that it sounds mealy-mouthed, if anything, in describing the situation. Do you think that this is as major a comment as the media has made it out to be? Is it as big a break from Netanyahu as is being suggested?
No, I think my answer is that what Donald Trump said, it's not enough, because what we need is to go further than admitting that what we see is real. What we need to see is moving from statement into action.
Yeah.
So there is something which is different in this comment, but we know about President Trump that will say 1 minute this, and the next thing it might be, you lose concentration and he will move and say something very differently, because it's only last week that he says that the way that Hamas behaves, it actually asks to die. So what does it suggest? Continue the war, stopping the war? But most importantly, we see so many statements, not only by Trump, but by, there was a statement signed by 28 countries. We hear about the individual countries signed. It's not anymore after 22 months of this war, at the pictures, the horrific pictures that we see, there are horrendous images. It's what they do. It's not what they say. Unless they're ready to put some meat behind in one way behind their statements, I think it became meaningless. I don't think people in Gaza care about statements anymore. They want to see lorries full of food and other humanitarian aid coming. They want to see the war coming to an end. They want to see the reconstruction of Gaza. So I think we can hang to one comment or another comment by this leader or another leader, but at this point, so far into this war, we need to see action.
With the statement that Trump made as well, I mean, just to add some more context to it, I'm sure most people listening have seen some images coming from Gaza, and we've all seen just, it's kind of indescribable, but it's much more than some children being very hungry, isn't it? The situation, can you at all quantify how dire this is? Because, as I say, Trump breaking from Netanyahu may have some impact or whatever, but what I found frustrating was that it almost sounds flippant the way he was describing the situation. It is much more dire than he's put across there, isn't it?
And we know that this is kind of the Trump style, which is usually flippant. But again, we need to look into the substance. And yes, the fact that, again, for the first time, the President of the United States acknowledges that there is, call it starvation, famine, hunger, lack of access to food that risk health, all of the above, the fact is that there is a need, an urgent need to bring more humanitarian aid. It's not new. We know that at least 500, 600 to 600 lorries are needed any single day in order to improve the situation there. We also know that there are lorries waiting on the border. So it's possible. What you need is to allow these lorries to enter into Gaza. What need is to have distribution centers that are not run by the Israeli military, but those who are their profession to do that. The UN agencies, the NGOs, they know how to deal with that. So yes, I think we should welcome what Trump said. I think there are other developments in the last few days that are positive, but for the people of Gaza, it's very slow. Now, talking about quantify, we are talking, especially with starvation, it's when it starts, it's very few numbers you're talking, which is still terrible. You take it one day 8 and 14, but it's exponential because it's something that develops until it gets into really huge numbers. It's unlike when people are killed by shooting or bombing. This is immediate. Starvation is excruciating, painful way to die. B, it depends on the ability of the body to cope with that, about access here and there to food, how long they are going with that, about their age, about their state of health. But at the same time, even if the numbers look at the beginning as relatively low compared to roughly 60,000 people killed already in the war, you'll see how exponentially, if there is no food and water and medical aid entering, how it gets much worse in relatively short time.
And absolutely incredibly to kind of pair what you've said with what Netanyahu has said. He says, or has said, there is no starvation in Gaza, despite all of the evidence that we've seen in pictures and videos and in the number of deaths that have been recorded, as you rightly point out. In terms of in Israel, surely that kind of line, that kind of lie, I'll say, isn't going unnoticed.
First of all, we can feel a full program of inaccuracies of Netanyahu.
Yes.
So I'm not so sure we will take Netanyahu at face value because Netanyahu said this must be true. If at all, this is most of the time, definitely in recent years, exactly the opposite. We have to rely on those on the ground, whether it's UN agencies, whether it's still the media that is there, the images that we see, and not what Netanyahu. And obviously, we can, as Netanyahu try, it's the definition of exactly of starvation. How many people in what condition exactly in order that it will meet. I think this is not the kind of debate that any human being with any conscience would like to enter into. It's the fact is 22 months into this war, after so many people killed, so many children, innocent people that have nothing to do with Hamas, and Israel is the one that, after it violated the ceasefire agreement on the 18th of March, also stopped until May humanitarian aid for entry. It doesn't come without consequences, and the consequences are exactly what we see now. Now, many in Israel don't want to go back to your question. Many in Israel just don't want to see that. It's not comfortable. It's inconvenient truth. And I see it as willful ignorance or willful denial. If I don't see that, I don't know about that, then I don't need to do anything about it, and I don't feel guilty. And to complement it, there are some elements in the very extreme right wing. It doesn't represent all Israelis. They are not in denial. It's exactly what they want. They want this to ensure that Palestinians are so desperate that they will live so-called on their own volition. Of course, if you're in this condition and you can be offered food or shelter or protection from military, it's not exactly, they use voluntary migration. It's completely involuntary if this happens. And I think at the end of the day, and it's a great shame for Israel and for its people, that by not demonstrating against that, by not speaking up against that, they become complicit.
With Netanyahu, this is a hard question to answer on his mindset. Do you think he genuinely believes the things he's saying? Do you think he is deliberately trying to be ignorant to the things he's saying, or is it basically he feels he has to say what he's saying out of pure self-interest? I'm just trying to, do you know what I mean? To try and get his mindset. I find him a quite impossible person to understand, and I'm sorry to ask you to attempt to get into his brain, but if you could slightly, can you make any sense of what angle it seems to be he's coming from, why he is trying to reject reality? Is it just pure self-interest, or is it out of he doesn't believe what's happening is happening, or, as you say, does he know what's happening is happening and he wants it to happen but he can't admit that?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, I'm a political scientist, and I'm not so sure this is the right profession.
No, yeah, I need a psychologist of some kind, potentially, yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. But I think there is element of truth in all of this. I think human beings are capable of convincing themselves what is the truth when it's self-serving. You know, it's cognitive dissonance, and I think on this level, it's on a huge scale of denial. But on this sense, it's a criminal denial. Now, it's first of all the fact that continuing the war, serves Netanyahu. That's we know, and we know it for sure. And when there was back in January pressure from Trump, even before he was inaugurated, to stop the war, he agreed to a ceasefire. We all knew that he won't fulfill all these obligations there. Reality, he needs a coalition. He has people within the coalition that want to continue the war. You know, the ultra-nationalist, messianic, religious of the ilk of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Strzok and the others. And, you know, they have a different plan. Their plan is, at the end of the day, to occupy Gaza, rebuild settlements there, and ensuring that there are little as possible Palestinians. Now, because of his corruption trial, he needs a coalition. Some parties won't form with him an alternative coalition. He already in a minority government because the ultra-Orthodox, and it's to do with drafting young rabbinical seminar students legislation. They threatened to leave the coalition, basically left the coalition. So he more and more relies on the extreme right wing. And for his political survival, he will do anything. And this is, you know, he's very cynical at this stage of his political career. There will always been an element of this in him, but it became more and more profound and defined him as his legal affairs became more and more sticky. Now, whether he believes in that, I think he tells himself a story that is not as bad. He sees the pictures. He knows what it means. The military tells him, the military warns him against it. And we already said that he said different things in the last 2 days. And even Smotrich says, oh, maybe we should allow some humanitarian aid because if we won't let it, not because they care about the people there, because it won't allow us to defeat Hamas. So all in all, try kind of to analyze the way we think. It's all utilitarian. It's all opportunistic in order to keep the coalition goes until the next election, whenever it happens between now and October of next year, and continue the war in Gaza. But if I may, only one more thing. Those are people that don't even care about their own people. They don't care about the hostages. They don't care that Israel is losing soldiers almost on a daily basis right now in Gaza. So almost to expect them, we should, but to care about the people of Gaza, it will be almost naive.
So many genocide studies scholars have called this genocide now. There's been a couple of Israeli human rights organizations have said the same. Amnesty International has said the same. The UN Special Rapporteur has said the same. And yet still there seems to be huge reluctance from a lot of people to call it genocide. And I'm struggling to understand that on a terms of why it's so charged to label it in that way, when to me it seems experts are saying it. So that seems to be you would expect the media, etc., to follow. Could you give me your thoughts on why that word in particular has become so much of a debate when it comes to what we're saying?
I think genocide is a loaded word.
Uh-huh.
The other thing, it's a matter of legal definition. And the definition relies to a large extent on intention. In my view, and I'm inviting you to go back to interviews that I gave already in October 2023, November 2023, that personally, I'm less interested in the legal definition and I'm mainly interested in a ceasefire. Because no legal definition stops war.
Yeah.
It was enough for me to see the pictures from Gaza already at the beginning of it, to understand in which direction it was going. And what we end is the Israeli says all what we do is within international law. Other people call it genocide, it's illegal. But at the end of the day, the people of Gaza that suffer, immense suffer, they are caught in a legal battle of the definition if they are killed as part of a legal war, of a genocide, other war crimes that we know that are committed there almost on a daily basis. The only thing we don't manage is to find a political settlement that will end their suffering. And that's, I must admit, personally, bothers me more than the legal definition. And, I will keep all the decision whether it's genocide or no genocide for a minute after the war ends, when the fire, when there is more humanitarian aid entering, when we see that the people of Gaza are safe, then the ICJ will decide. Is it fall under definition? Now, if you ask me whether people within the Israeli government with genocidal intentions, I believe so. Because when I ask if a minister says that he would like to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza, it doesn't take a genius to guess what he wants. If there are people there that want, support starvation, that's, I believe, they have genocidal intention. Then there are others that want to expel, and they say we want to kick out all of the Palestinians. But again, with all due respect to some of the people that initiate the legal process, unfortunately, it hasn't saved so far a single life in Gaza. So I wonder if we should concentrate our efforts from the beginning elsewhere.
So, on that kind of note, in terms of what has been going on politically, I want to bring it back to the relationship that exists between Trump and Netanyahu. Because, as we've mentioned, Trump is a big player in this. The US and Israel have a relationship that is incredibly important to what's going on. And recently we saw Netanyahu's visit to the White House. I was just wondering whether you could perhaps explain to us what came from that meeting and just where that relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, America and Israel, is at right now.
Yes. And I think, as always, the relationship between Israel and the United States are crucial for everything that happens, which relates to the wider region. And we saw that when the United States and when President Trump wants something to happen, it does happen. We mentioned earlier the ceasefire. It happened. Hostages were released, ceasefire took place, humanitarian aid entered into Gaza, Palestinian prisoners were released. It was not ideal the way that it operated, but it was better than what we see since the ceasefire was violated. We see the influence of the United States in the war with Iran, the 12 days of the war in Iran. And Trump was very proud to say, when I told Netanyahu enough bombing, they have to turn the airplanes back. They were on the way to their probably last mission. And Trump said, don't do it. So the only conclusion we can reach is when the United States has the will to make Israel do something. More than any other countries, though, as an aside, I think some other countries relinquish responsibility by saying, we can't have leverage over Israel, which I don't think is true. And we can discuss it later if you like. But on this case, there's such close relation between the United States and Israel on any level. It's the military aid, it's the level of trade, it's intelligence sharing, it's the kind of weapons that's supplied by the United States. Without the United States, Israel would not have been able to defend its own population in the war with Iran. And just imagine, without the American air defense system, let alone the satellite images and everything that has to do with defending Israel, the United States is the only country seems to actually, and I think mistakenly so, not to recognize in the permanent member of the UN, not to recognize, not recognize Palestinian statehood. So supporting it politically and diplomatically, supported in the ICC, in the ICJ. So if the United States want a change, it can ensure that it happens. But going back where we started, it starts with a statement and it ends with a statement and nothing beyond, and the war continues.
Do you think that we may see, and I don't mean to ask you to predict the future here, and I apologize for the incredibly hard questions that we're asking of you, but when you look at the US's involvement in this, could we potentially see a change? And what I mean by that is there was some polling that was issued from Gallup, I think it was 2 days ago, that found that only 32% of Americans approve of Israel's military action now, which is compared to 50% in 2023. So, within the US, there seems to be a change in attitude towards what's happening. Do you think that that could be a reason for Trump to change his outlook when it comes to getting things done in Israel and stopping what we're seeing in Gaza?
I think he has quite a few reasons to do that. And one of them, if you think from reputational point of view, from the credit that Israel had in the international community, the sympathy, the empathy back in October 7, most of the world supported Israel, and rightly so. This was an horrific day. But the free fall in Israel, in support in Israel, across the world, and including in the United States, it's one of the things that Netanyahu and his government will have to explain to its own people one day. And I hope they will, there will be some accountability about it. But, American people watch what we all watching, maybe not as much. They don't have some of the channels that we are watching what happened in Gaza. They see the United States getting more and more involved, including in the war in Iran. And ask them question, is this the best way for us to spend whether our money? Look, we look at the reduction of some of the air defense system, the missiles, in the stocks in the United States. It's a real worry. Only after 12 days of war with Iran. So there are consequences to all of that. When there is a full agenda in the United States, we know that most Americans, first and foremost, are more interested in domestic politics, more in the foreign politics. But support of Israel was almost instinctively. And Israel is losing this support. And in the long term, it's dangerous. Now, whether Trump takes any note of that, bear in mind, he's not, unless he changed the constitution, he's not going to become a third-term president. I think what should bother him is going to affect the midterm election, and this is a major issue for him. And the other things, continue supporting what's happening in Gaza is not going to bring him the Nobel Peace Prize, that's for sure.
In terms of what Trump could do right now that could change things, what do you think the number one thing to create maximum potential change could be?
The immediate thing is dealing with humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
The immediate thing is to allow more lorries, to forget about fiasco of the what so-called Gaza humanitarian fund. You have more than 1,000 people killed while queuing to receive humanitarian aid. I can't think about any parallel in history that you
Yeah.
queue for food and then you're shot by the very people supposed to supply you with humanitarian aid. It should go back and this. I should probably put it like this. One of the good things about Trump is never afraid of a U-turn, and he will always justify a U-turn. So maybe it's not too late to admit that try to sideline organizations like UNRWA, other UN agencies, NGOs from humanitarian aid was a mistake. Saying that he was moved by the images that he's seen from Gaza, let them back into doing what they are doing best and providing humanitarian aid. There are on borders enough aid that can come from Egypt and Jordan. They need the permission by Israel. What we see now, 60, 70 lorries won't do. So I think this is number one. Second, we know that, Steve Witkoff is on his way to Tel Aviv. I think should be some harsh words there about bringing the war to an end. I know they blame Hamas. It's not a question only about Hamas. No one thinks that Hamas is a great organization, probably not the future of the Palestinian people, though this is for Palestinians to decide. But when you have a state versus an organization that is proscribed by many countries as a terrorist organization, you can go and say that I'm not stopping a war. I'm not providing humanitarian aid because Hamas is a terrorist organization. You need to take a view that the war, because Israel has very little targets left in Gaza, to find a way to end the war. I'm sure they find a way even to declare victory. And if Trump will say that, it's going to happen. Then we can move to looking at the reconstruction of Gaza, look at resuming talks about settling, because the West Bank is also boiling, and taking from there.
There's rumors of more nations recognizing Palestinian statehood. There's talk that the UK will do that. That's something that's in the pipeline. How would this happen, and how much tangible difference do you think this would make? Would that be a step towards other countries, as you say, accepting some more responsibility and realizing that they can do something beyond just the US? Or, unfortunately, would this be quite, sort of tokenistic without, as you say, just doing more to actually stop what is really happening right now?
I think it's important that more countries recognize Palestinian statehood. We have already more than 140 states that recognize Palestine. Palestine was recognized in the UN. It has an observer status. So we know that most of the world recognize Palestinian state, and it goes back to the partition plan. The partition plan of 1947 talks about two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state. And that's where the Oslo Accords were leading towards and negotiation then. Now, from a legal point of view, we know for the international community to recognize a Palestinian state, it has to go through the Security Council, and then we are going back to the United States. If France and the UK recognize, it leaves the United States as the only permanent member of the Security Council to not recognize. So it isolates, in this sense, the United States. Having first France, then the UK, it means also for the first time G7 countries recognize Palestine as a state. So there is some momentum here, which I think it's important. The other thing, because it can't pass in the Security Council due to the opposition by the United States, and it won't pass in the European Union as an EU recognition due to the need for unity within the European Union. We have to do it state by state. But I think it's important. What I think it's regrettable about the position that the UK government is taking on this one is that recognition of Palestinian state seems like a stick, not as a positive move. It's put as a condition. If Israel is going to agree to this condition, the UK, if it's not agreeing, then it will recognize Palestinian state. I think there is a value in recognizing Palestinian state, regardless of whether Israel will fulfill this condition. You know, as a spoiler, Israel is not going to agree to this condition, so there is no worry there.
Just on a final question to wrap up our conversation. I mean, I think most people look at all of this and feel quite hopeless. And we've spoken so much about that. It does feel like Trump, unfortunately, is someone who's so much responsibility lays on his shoulders, and he's not someone I particularly trust with all that responsibility. But you mentioned earlier in the conversation what you think other nations can be doing. Could you give me some examples of what sort of things that should be, what could be happening, and perhaps what sort of things people outside of the US should maybe be encouraging their leaders to do in order to help this situation come to a resolution of some kind?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, many times when people talk about pessimism or hopelessness, my answer to this, listen, all of this is a state of mind. It's not a policy. There is so many good reasons to be, we look at the world around us right now, not to be very hopeful. But as all of us, we need to wake in the morning and look for solutions to improve the situation like this. I refuse to feel hopeless about the situation. Humanity been in situation even worse than this one, as terrible the situation, and managed to come out strong out of it. And there is a lot what to do. You see, if you have trade relations like the one between the EU and Israel, if you have the support you give Palestinians, you have also a leverage. But in order for this to be effective, you need to be ready. You need to show leadership that you are ready to use this leverage. So in a way, this is almost reversing what I've said just a few minutes ago. The fact that for the first time, Prime Minister Starmer is ready to put conditions, it means that when the situation gets really worse, countries are ready to use the leverage that they have to do something. But it should not have taken so long. This kind of leadership should have. So if we are talking about recognition in Palestinian state, putting pressure, to using the kind of points of pressure in order to end the war and end it immediately, bringing the hostages back, allowing humanitarian aid, ensuring that it's all doable because it's there. It's only now when we see this horrific pictures, countries start they show readiness to use this leverage. But in all the relations with Israel, whether it's, look at how slow is putting sanctions on the most extreme settlers in the West Bank. How long do we need to look at settler violence in order to take a stand? How many olive trees has to be cut and houses to be burned or Palestinians to be shot, as the case only this week, in order that these settlers with sanction will be imposed on them. So there is so much work to do. What is lacking is leadership, political will, and courage. And if this is not going to happen, we'll see what we see now.
Professor Mekelberg, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for listening to American Friction. If If you found that conversation useful and want us to keep having conversations such as that with Yossi, we really do need your support to keep the show going. Remember, you can back us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/American Friction. There's a link in the show notes to sign up to that. We really do want to keep going and keep bringing you this sort of conversation and this sort of information as much as we can. If you can't back us financially, we totally get that. But if you could rate and review us and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, we'd really appreciate it. I'm Jacob Jarvis. Thank you very much for listening to American Friction.